All right. Well, I am very excited to be with you all here on the 20th floor of the Natural Resources headquarters in Sacramento. And we've got a number of people joining us online to be in conversation with our colleague and the author, Aaron N.K. Haiman. Aaron, thank you for sitting down with us.
Thanks for having me, Wade. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Haiman.
So you are somebody who's dedicated your career to helping to protect nature, and you've got this passion even outside of your work that brings you to write this book. Share a little bit, first of all, about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I got bitten by the birding bug at a very young age. I was about 6 years old, and I met a really amazing birder and natural historian. And he was leading this class on bird identification for kids. And I was like, wow, this is amazing.
And where was this, California? Or?
Yeah, this was in Marin County.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started following him around all over the place, volunteering for his organization, learning about birds as much as I possibly could. And that just sort of kept with me constantly through getting into my teenage years, undergraduate, graduate work, the whole thing.
Wow. And so then talk about your work and your life in Sacramento.
Yeah, so I came to the Sacramento region for graduate school. I went to UC Davis, so go Aggies. There you go. And yeah, living in Davis and living next to the Delta and sort of understanding what was going on in the Central Valley was sort of a new thing for me. I was a Bay Area kid. And so coming over the hills to this side was interesting and new. Got to experience Tule fog for the first time, which was exciting. And it was really fun to sort of live in this environment. And then after graduate school, I sort of stayed in the Valley. I got a job with the state of California and jumped into it even more and more, including about 5.5 years with the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy, which is really where I got into the Delta in a really serious way. And yeah, it's been really fun to sort of jump from a couple of different positions, but all sort of interacting with this landscape.
That's great. I want to talk a lot more about the Delta, but I want to talk about what it means to be a birder, from somebody who's not necessarily a birder to somebody who is. First of all, yourself a birder. All right, wow, cool. About half.
All right, but I'm going to tag another question onto that. Raise your hand if you enjoy birds in any format at all. Yeah, see, you're all birders.
All right. Well, that's a great question. So the way I think about birders and birding is it's a little intimidating because you've got birders that are out there. They're spending a lot of time on the landscape with binoculars. Some of the ones that are super intense, I've learned, have these life lists where they are literally trying to see as many birds on planet Earth as possible. So how do you define a birder and sort of what type of birder are you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the definition of birder is as broad as can be, and I like that. I think that anyone who enjoys birds in any format, using any sense you can possibly think of, that counts as far as I'm concerned. I've been more of a serious birder, and yes, I do keep a life list. And I do go and chase rare birds.
And am I right in terms of explaining what the life list is?
Yeah, you're right. Throwing all these terms around. So a life list is just a list of every species of bird that you've ever seen in your life. And so many birders who care about this kind of thing will keep a personal life list. I have a life list. And every time you see a new species, you check that off. And it's very satisfying to add that check mark to your list.
And you have to see it. You have to make visual.
See it, hear it. You have to be able to identify it.
Okay.
And it has to be wild. There are a few rules for how to do this. You can't go to a zoo and see a bunch of captive birds and check those off your life list. That doesn't count. But yeah. So, and I mean, I do think that birder is also a really good term. A lot of people often talk about bird watching. And bird watching a lot of times sort of gets to the same idea of birding, but if you think about it, it's a sort of a sighted, sort of a special term. It kind of implies that if you aren't seeing a bird, maybe you aren't enjoying the bird, you aren't sort of participating in the group. And I think birder is a much more inclusive term. So I really try to push people birding, not bird watching, birding.
Yeah.
We're all birders.
So maybe I'll consider myself a birder now.
There you go.
And I'll share, thank you. I'll share that, there's a lot of things we could say around the downsides of modern technology, but a couple of apps that I have, including this app called Merlin, which you no doubt know, is incredible. I consider it the Shazam for birds, where you can actually record the bird song, and then it'll do its best to help you understand what birds there are. Me and my 11-year-old utilize that all the time, and frankly, it helps us connect with birds in ways that we wouldn't if we had to see them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of those apps are fantastic for getting people sort of more connected to the birds that they see. I mean, being able to identify a bird is by no means the be-all and end-all of sort of bird study and bird enjoyment, but it certainly is a great gateway. Being able to know, oh, that's a Wilson's warbler, and oh, that's a long-billed dowitcher, like that, it helps sort of know what your neighbors are. And having apps like those, which either by sight or by sound can help you sort of get there, I think they're wonderful tools.
That's amazing. Was there a gateway bird in Marin County, like a gateway drug that got you into birding?
So this idea is a spark bird, is what we in the community call it. That sort of bird, or that moment, that experience that galvanized your interest in birds and sort of pushed you into birding as more of a hobby. And my spark bird was actually dead. It was a stuffed, mounted white-tailed kite. You know that guy that I talked about, who I met when I was 6? At that class, he had this thing on the desk. And I sort of noticed what it was, and he saw me noticed it, and I sort of took notice of him noticing me. It was this nice little synergistic moment. And that moment and sort of the relationship with that guy kind of pushed me onto my sort of path. And so that was really my spark bird.
Wow. You know, I have a spark bird, and now that I'm birding, and I grew up going to my parents were educators, so they had the summers mostly off, and we went every summer we went up to northern Ontario to a cabin with no running water or electricity, and it was on Loon Lake, so I got to hear loons on a regular basis, which is just turned me on.
That's an awesome spark bird.
And when we do Q&A, I want to hear other spark bird here.
Absolutely.
In the room. So fast forward, you are in Sacramento. You've got a job, in our agency doing its work. So you've got a day job. What compelled you to actually get into the Delta birds and ultimately write a book?
Well, unfortunately, while I love my day job, it doesn't actually pay me to go birding very often.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to figure that out. And so, it's been this passionate hobby of mine on the side, getting other people interested in birding, sharing knowledge of birds. I'm pretty active on social media, also trying to spread knowledge about birds and birding and nature and science to as wide an audience as I can. And so, being in the Delta and sort of having some free time, we all have weekends and mornings, and birding is great for morning stuff. You can wake up early, get your birding fix done, and then go to work. So it all dovetails together.
And is it true that dawn and dusk are the best times for birding?
Usually, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on what species. There are certainly exceptions to that. But at dawn, when everybody's waking up, birds like to tell all their neighbors that they survived the night. And so it's a good time to go and see who's around.
Wow. So let's talk about the Delta. I spend a lot of my time focused on the Delta, and of course it's this really complex place because it's a biodiversity hotspot, one of the most biodiverse places on planet Earth. It's also this really important place for water infrastructure. It's also a place where a lot of people live and make their livelihoods. We hear a lot about fish in the Delta because a lot of our fish are imperiled moving through the Delta. But what would you tell us about birds in the Delta, just for the beginners or those of us who haven't really thought a lot about birds and habitation in the Delta? Yeah,
so the Delta is a really incredibly important part of the Pacific Flyway, which is this sort of giant superhighway that links all the way from eastern Siberia all along the northern edge of North America, all the way along the western edge of North America, and the western edge of South America, all the way to Tierra del Fuego. So it connects 3 different continents to each other. And there are billions of birds, that's billion with a B, that travel some part of that superhighway every year. And about 350 species, 250 of which can be found in the Delta.
Wow.
And so a lot of these birds come through and stay in for at least a short while our Delta, which makes it a really important stopping point. These birds, they need to find food on their journeys. They need to find places to rest on their journeys. And if the Delta can offer those to those birds, then they'll do well. And if the Delta cannot offer those birds, then that puts them in real peril.
Wow, and I have to imagine that the Delta is more important than ever, given we've lost over 90% of our wetlands in California. So this great big Central Valley that used to be floodplain, a lot of it would flood up in the winter, is no longer as a result of farming and communities. So does the Delta play a more important role in that Pacific Flyway now?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you think about a chain of stepping stones across a lake, if you don't want to get wet, you have to step on all those stepping stones. Maybe you can lose a couple stepping stones, and it's okay. But if for every one you lose, it makes the ones you still have that much more important.
That's a really, really good metaphor. And so when the Delta is this estuary, and an estuary, as I've been educated, is sort of where salt water meets fresh water. So these 250 species that use this, are they all adapted to this kind of brackish water? Or are they using the Delta differently?
Oh no, there's a huge range. One of the wonderful things about the Delta is it has such a diverse, complex landscape with all these diverse sets of habitats. You've got oak woodlands, you've got riparian gallery forests, you've got wetlands, you've got rolling grasslands, and there are tons of different species of birds that are each specialized in using all those different kinds of habitats.
Okay, and there's migrators, as you've said, on the Pacific Flyway. Are there birds that just basically live their whole lives in the Delta?
Yeah, there are definitely a decent number that have realized that Central California is a wonderful place to live, and why go anywhere?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they just stay here 12 months out of the year.
Yeah. So we talk a lot on this floor about, protecting biodiversity, the loss of species off our planet. We all think about climate change as this global threat, but we're also losing species off this planet at an alarming rate. So I've also learned more about birds and the loss of birds, both species, but also just the abundance of birds. And if we think back to our youth, depending on where we lived, a lot of us hear a lot less bird song today than we used to. Can you just talk about that as somebody who studies birds? And then, are we seeing these types of impacts and threats in the Delta?
Yes, sadly. So it's been estimated that over the past 100 years or so, North America has lost something like 3 trillion birds, that individual birds. So if you just walk around, you're talking about abundance. Just go out and walk around across North America, there are 3 trillion birds less now than there were before. And yes, the Delta has definitely experienced some of those significant declines. We've definitely got some species that, because of that loss of habitat, because of those loss of wetlands in particular, have seen their populations get really hit. A lot of our California birds that sort of live in California and are found nowhere else on Earth are sometimes most vulnerable to that because they just don't have anywhere else to go. Like, this is their home.
Yeah. So what do you say? What would you define as the biggest threats to those birds that are using the Delta?
Habitat destruction is pretty much always going to be number one. Conversion of land, maybe from different types of agriculture. There are certainly some types of agriculture that are much more bird friendly, and there are some types that are less bird friendly. So that kind of conversion can hurt birds. Certainly conversion from any kind of open space to urban settings is going to be hard on a lot of birds.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of human-driven habitat destruction is the biggest.
So talk about bird-friendly agriculture versus bird-unfriendly agriculture. What are differences or maybe examples?
Yeah, so a great example, rice can often be done very bird-friendly. There are lots of sort of different strategies that rice farmers can use as far as how they harvest their crops, when they harvest their crops, how they flood their fields and by how much, stuff like that. They can definitely tilt the scales and help birds a lot if they do certain things, and if they ignore those things, it's harder for birds. There are some types of agriculture. Vineyards are often not great for birds. They're just so controlled, and the structure of the plants, if you think of a vineyard, it's a very manicured, very controlled, sort of physical setting. And that just means that there's not a lot of places for birds to sort of hide, and not a lot of what the birds need.
Yeah. I want to emphasize the co-benefits of rice production. You may know that Sacramento Valley is a huge rice producer, producing some of the best rice in the world, including a lot of the super high quality rice that goes to Japan that is consumed there. And remarkably, for a very long time, rice growers used to burn the remaining plants when the crops were harvested at the end of the year. That created major air quality issues in the Sacramento Valley. And so they were restricted from doing that. And at the same time, they got turned on to the idea of leaving water on the landscape to decompose the plants, which is perfect because essentially it provides that wetland habitat that we've lost so much of over the decades and over a century. So I'm really excited that when you go up there to, when you drive up north of Sacramento and you see these flooded rice fields, yes, that's serving an agricultural purpose, but it's also serving a habitat purpose, right?
Absolutely. And it's one of those great examples of sort of the more we've learned, the better we can do it. Because it's not just a matter of flooding your rice fields or not flooding them. Now we know different birds need different depths of water, and so different farmers have figured out different timings to be like, okay, we're gonna flood our fields to 2 inches now, and then we're gonna up it to 4 inches later, because different birds need different depths, and they can really fine tune it and provide a lot of great habitat for a huge diversity of different birds.
That's really cool, and our Department of Fish and Wildlife are really experts at this. So in another part of the state, in the Salton Sea, very close to the Mexican border, a real desert-like environment, there's a huge inland sea that provides one of these stones on the stepping stones that stop on the Pacific Flyway. We've lost a lot of habitat, and a lot of people in our agency are working to bring it back. And it's really cool to go down there and see. They're really focused on different habitat, even within the same footprint. So, you've got different depths, right, and different places that they can nest and hang out.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah. People often ask me, like, backyard gardeners and stuff like that. Like, what can I do to make my backyard more bird friendly? And really, it's that diversity of habitat that I always try to lean into. If you can have a bush and a tree and some grass, maybe a little open soil, like try to throw as much different stuff as you can, because different birds are going to need those different things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Incredible. Okay, give us some pro tips for birds in this part of California. So everybody that's here today in person likely lives in this region. We're moving into this incredible time for bird watching because it's winter. Just talk about what winter means for bird watching here in this part of California, and then what we should think about doing if we want to go see birds in the Delta.
Yeah, so birding Central California, especially the Delta, in winter is epic for a few different reasons. There are a lot of raptors, a lot of birds of prey that come from different parts of the country, different parts of the state, and spend their winters here. So you get this very high diversity of both numbers and species of raptors. So you can go driving out across grasslands and agricultural lands like that, and you can find just tons of stuff, really fun.
And remind us, just for the uninitiated, what a raptor is.
A raptor, yeah. So raptors are the birds of prey, right? Hooked bill, hooked claws, they're predatory. So things like hawks, falcons, eagles, these are all the raptors. And so yeah, we just have tons of them that spend the winter here as our winter neighbors. And then also they're all the waterfowl. One of the things that the Central Valley is the most famous for is their winter waterfowl extravaganza. You have geese and ducks flying in like crazy. You have our sandhill crane, which is this iconic 4.5 foot tall species that come down here. And again, these are all birds that they come here for the winter time. To rest, to find lots of food, to get themselves ready for the next breeding season, which is where they will leave the Delta and migrate back to wherever they came from. And so while they're here, though, we have this moment where they're all concentrated into this relatively small area, and you can go out to places like the Cosumnes River Preserve, or Staten Island, or the Yolo Bypass. There are so many places around the Delta that you can just go, and if you time it right, you can see just amazing fly-ins or fly-outs of these incredible flocks of birds.
And you just name-checked 3 places, 2 of which are about 20 minutes from here. The Cosumnes River Preserve, south on the 5. Been down there, there's sandhill cranes hanging out there.
Absolutely.
As there are on Staten Island, right?
Yeah.
And Staten Island is an interesting example because I think the Nature Conservancy's been a little bit involved in that, and they're trying to do some bird-friendly farming there.
Yeah, the Nature Conservancy, my understanding is they own, I think, the entire island.
Okay.
And they manage it as a sandhill crane preserve, primarily. Now, one of the nice things about that is that there are lots of other birds that also like the same kind of thing that sandhill cranes like. So by managing it for sandhill cranes, you're almost unavoidably benefiting all these other species, which means that when any of us go down to Staten Island, we can see, yes, lots of sandhill cranes, and also lots of other things as well. Really great birding. It's especially good just at sundown, because many of the birds in the area spend their night, they'll sleep on Staten Island, but they don't stay there in the daytime. So they're out foraging, doing all their stuff, living their lives, scattered across the landscape. But then at nighttime, as the sun is setting behind Mount Diablo, they all start coming in, and they all start concentrating and concentrating and concentrating on this one island. It's pretty amazing.
And I shared with you, Aaron, before our talk here that our executive team within the Office of the Secretary, a couple times a year, we get out and go get into nature and go see the stuff that we're working to protect. And so our next trip is actually, I believe, to Staten Island to see the
Awesome.
sandhill crane. So we need to make sure that you're with us.
That'll be fantastic.
So you also talked about the YOLO bypass, and for everybody that's traveled from Sacramento to Davis, we know we're going over a causeway. Talk about what that, and we're going over the YOLO bypass. Just talk about what that is and what it means to both birds and fish.
So the YOLO bypass is this kind of incredible feature of the landscape where it's this open area that is there waiting to carry floodwaters from the Sacramento River out onto a landscape that isn't the city of Sacramento. And so it prevents the city from flooding. And it's big enough and wide enough that it can hold a lot of water, which is fantastic. But one of the nice things about that is you can't build anything in it, right? It's got to be this open space to carry those floodwaters, which means it's this open natural area. There's a lot of rice farming that goes on in there. And there's a lot of fish migration that moves through the canals and channels of the bypass. And there are a lot of birds that come and take advantage of all that open space to do things like live and breed during the summertime. They are winter visitors there in the wintertime to forage, and they're also migrating through as they're going sort of north and south on their annual migrations.
And there's a Department of Fish and Wildlife managed ecological reserve, right, within that footprint.
Yep.
So for anybody who's here today or listening in, and they want to go check this out, are these places like Consumnes River Preserve or YOLO Bypass or Staten Island, do you have to make a reservation? Do you just show up?
So one of the wonderful things about birding is that it's very easy to do most of the time. All those places that you just named, they're all open to the public. You can just go. You don't have to tell anybody you're going. You don't have to make a reservation. You don't have to pay a fee. They're just open. Just show up and enjoy. There are certainly places that maybe because of the access, maybe things are a little bit tighter and you do have to make a reservation, but those are really the exceptions. The rule is most of the places you can just go and enjoy. Staten Island, it's owned by the Nature Conservancy, right? But the road is a public road. You can just drive down there, park along the side, and enjoy the spectacle.
It's incredible and so close, and there are so many of these wildlife refuges also to the north of us. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, one of my best nature experiences in this job was seeing an evening fly-off from a place called Gray Lodge.
Gray Lodge.
Which is a wildlife refuge about an hour north of here, and it reminded me, or it was the image of what I think the Serengeti would be, just in terms of like the abundance. It seemed like tens of thousands of birds just decide to take off, right? Is that fly-off? Like,
yeah.
What happens in that situation in the evening where they all just decide to take off?
Yeah, so it's sort of similar to what I was talking about with the sandhill cranes coming into Staten Island at the nighttime. Sometimes birds will gather in a place and then they know where they're going to spend the night, but they aren't there yet. And so when the moment comes, all the birds decide, okay, it's time to go. And so they all get up together and they all fly off to where they're going to be spending the night. And when you can time it right, and you're there just before they leave, and you can see all those birds come off and hear them all come off, it's astounding. It can be really breathtaking.
It's really pretty incredible. So let's talk about your book. I'm going to grab a copy of this. And walk us, this, first of all, it's a beautiful book, and I hope those of you who are here in person come and check it out. It's just gorgeous to be able to see the illustrations. I also think it's really accessible, because sometimes you get these field guides that are a lot of information, but they're super detailed, and you almost have to sort of read code to understand what this is. This is super accessible. So talk about when you had the idea to do this book, and then how did it come to be?
Like many people, I've always sort of had that idea of, maybe someday I could write a book. But I was busy, doing lots of other things, didn't have time. And it just so happened that kind of several of the other things that I was doing all sort of came to an end, kind of suddenly. And I was sort of casting around, had this sort of creative energy, not really sure what to do with it. I was like, well, maybe it's time to write my book. Maybe now is the time. And so I had an idea for a book, not this book. I had a different idea. And I put together some book proposals, and I sent them off to publishers, and I got some very polite no thank yous.
Which is a big thing, because oftentimes you send something off and they don't even respond.
That's
right?
true. That's true. I was lucky enough that I got responses from most of them, but they were all no thank you, no thank you, no thank you. Until one of the publishers got back to me with a no thank you, but And they had this other idea for a book. They said, we've looked at what you've done online, we've looked at sort of your CV, we've looked at sort of some of your writings in various magazines, and we think, Aaron, that you might be a good fit for this other project. Would you like to learn more about that? And I was like, well, yeah, forget my idea. What do you guys want? The publisher is Heyday Books, and they have been developing this series on what they call hyperlocal birding, where they find someone who knows a lot about the birds of a really small geographic area. They're not talking about, the birds of California, much smaller than that. And they had just published the third one in this series, and they were kind of casting around looking for what the fourth one might be. And they asked me if I had any landscapes or areas that I was passionate about, that I knew about, that I felt like I could write stories about. And I was like, well, the Delta's a pretty cool place. And they went off and thought about that for a few minutes, and they came back and were like, yeah, we can do a Delta book. And so that sort of was the genesis.
That's amazing. And I'll say, Heyday Books, if you don't know them, they're remarkable. Kind of a legendary publisher in California, really focused on California.
Yeah.
They publish a magazine with Native American communities called News from Native California, which is remarkable. My wife actually got me a membership to Heyday last year, so now I understand a lot more of what they publish. But they just publish incredible books on California science, but nature, cultural history, et cetera.
Yeah.
So then they say, okay, let's go do this, Aaron, or go do this, Aaron. How long does it take? Like, how do you actually put this together?
Yeah, so I had about a year to write the book, and one of the first sort of obvious struggles was that I am not that talented an artist. I can write okay, I'm not a painter, I'm not a drawer. And so I was like, well, these books, they should be beautiful. I wanted mine to be beautiful. The other ones in the series are all gorgeous. And so I started thinking about who I wanted to illustrate my book for me. And Martha Espinoza is a Costa Rican scientific illustrator that I've worked with on a couple of other small projects. And so she's wonderful and super talented. If you go and check her website out, you will not be disappointed. And so I reached out to her. I said, I've got this deal, but I'm going to need a bunch of paintings. Like, are you game? Would you do it with me? And she said yes. And so she's the one who's created all of the illustrations. The photographs that you see behind me are mine, but all the illustrations are ones from the book. That's all Martha's work. And so she's super talented. And so she took a year to create all the illustrations. I took a year to create all the words. We put them together, sent them off to Heyday. Heyday took about a year to do all the editing, formatting, printing, all that kind of stuff. And then the book became a reality on shelves.
Wow. And what was that feeling like when you actually saw for the first hardbound copy?
It was awesome. It was totally awesome. It was a nice little surprise. I actually went down to Heyday's publishing house to pick something else up, and I didn't know the book was ready. And they were like, well, the book isn't ready, but the publisher, the printer, gave us this one first copy. Would you like to see it? I was like, would I like to see it? Of course I want to see it, yes. So yeah, I got a hold of my hand. They actually let me take that one home, so I have at home the very first one.
Amazing.
So yeah, it was a great feeling.
Wow. So as I'm paging through this book, I want to ask you the impossible question, which is, what is your favorite bird that you highlighted or featured in this book? I'll tell you mine, which is the sandhill crane.
There it is. Sandhill's a good one. I actually really struggle with this question. I don't have a favorite bird. The favorite bird is the one that I'm looking at any given moment. So when I'm out birding and I'm looking at a bird, that's it. That's the special one. That's my favorite bird. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. But disappointing. No, just kidding. So we did a huge 500-person summit for our 30 by 30 movement this year in San Diego, and Madeline's in the back. She was one of the people who brought that together. And that was at the Natural History Museum in San Diego.
Oh, cool.
And I had this incredible moment where one of the leaders of the museum took me and my daughter back into their archives and literally showed us a specimen of two endangered species, well, actually extinct species, the ivory-billed woodpecker and the Carolina parakeet, which are two sort of iconic birds that we lost over a century ago.
Yeah.
Are there specific birds that you're concerned about in California that are in threatened or endangered status?
Yeah, so there are lots of different ways of looking at how imperiled a bird is, but one good way is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology puts out a State of the Birds report every year. And it's a great resource for sort of figuring out on a very large scale, very macro scale, what's happening with birds. And they categorize birds into different sort of color ranges. So green birds are ones that are healthy and doing pretty well. Yellow alert birds, not so much. Orange alert birds, worse. Red alert birds are the ones that have small population sizes and steep declining trends. So like the ones that are in real trouble. We have 5 red alert species that are commonly found in the Delta. And so yeah, we definitely are facing some of those sort of conservation issues that are becoming more and more pressing as we go along.
Wow. And if you had a magic wand or were, in my position, what would you do to save those 5 red alert birds?
I mean, getting as much habitat sort of set aside for natural processes as possible is going to benefit all the birds, including those 5 red alert ones.
Yeah.
So keeping pollutions at a minimum, keeping disturbance at a minimum, and just letting the natural world kind of do its thing as much as possible.
Incredible. In a moment, I want to open it up to Q&A, and if you have a spark bird, you have to share it at the beginning of your Q&A. I know, so some of us were down at an international summit on biodiversity in Colombia last year, which was remarkable, and we actually got out in the nature with some birders who were so excited because, of course, they have these long life lists.
Oh yeah.
So how would you characterize the status of your life list, and are there parts of the world that you want to go to augment that?
Oh, yeah. So I'll be honest, my life list is fairly modest. I've never had sort of the means or real drive to go after like every rare, weird species you can possibly find.
But there are those people, right?
There absolutely are those people. Yeah, in the birding world, we call them twitchers.
Twitchers.
They get a little twitchy to like take that next check.
Don't be a twitcher.
Or, maybe be a twitcher. I mean, they can be fun. But I've never really been a twitcher. But yeah, there are tons of places. I've never been to South America anywhere, and so any spot in South America is surely going to impact my life list significantly. Yeah. Even without trying to twitch about it.
Good to know. Is there any part of California that you'd want to explore more on the birding front, or have you really exhausted all of the areas?
I think probably the part of California that I've exhausted the least is offshore. I've not done a lot of like pelagic sort of seabirding. And so there are a bunch of species that many people find fairly easily that I have not seen just because I haven't gone a few miles offshore.
Yeah. One of the places was a thrill before I ever lived in Sacramento was getting out to the Farallon Islands.
Yeah.
That's a great place for that too.
Yeah, I would love to go there. I haven't made it there yet.
Yeah. All right, let's open it up to questions for Aaron, or observations, or if you're just dying to share with us your spark bird.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Are there people? Yeah, let's in back. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you've seen this kind of pseudo-documentary that came out this year called Listers, and what your thoughts are on that. And if you haven't seen that one, maybe just your thoughts on the movie The Big Year with Jack Black.
So,
and repeat both for our folks who are listening.
yeah, so the first part of the question was about the sort of pseudo-documentary called Listers. I think it's on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And have I seen that and what I think of it, and then also the other big budget movie called The Big Year, which had a pretty star-studded cast actually, and my thoughts on that. So Listers, I haven't seen Listers all the way through yet. I got like the first chunk through, and then I got distracted and I didn't make it back. But it seems really fun, and I've certainly heard lots of really good things.
And is it so? It's about people that are birders that have these life lists.
Yeah, my understanding is, and like I said, I haven't seen much of it, but it's about a couple of brothers who decide to like take up birding, and they jump into their van and they cruise around and they try to find lots of species of birds. So it seems like a fun sort of adventure romp.
Yeah.
The Big Year is a movie about sort of the story, an event that actually happened. A big year is when a birder decides, okay, in this particular calendar year, I'm going to go around and I'm going to try to find as many species of birds as I possibly can. So kind of like life listing with a time frame. And people get very competitive with their big years. You can do big years at different scales, like people do county big years. Some people do state big years, but the big one is like the North American big year. And as it happened, 3 really big birders all decided to do their big year on the same year. I actually don't remember what year it was, but they were all competing with each other, flying, driving around, just going crazy to try to find as many species of birds as they possibly could. And the fact that these 3 guys all did it at the same time kind of attracted a lot of attention. And so some people made a movie about sort of the dramatization of that big year that they all do.
Has anybody seen it? Yeah, what do you think? Worth watching?
I mean, it has Steve Martin in it, so.
Yeah, Steve Martin, there you go.
So you say yes?
It's like one of my favorite movies. It star-studded cast, really wholesome and very funny. Like a lot of jokes at people's expense. It's like very uplifting, and like if you're working in this building, you probably hear about natural resources and birds. So
Yeah.
highly recommend it.
All right, so if people are taking some time off for later this month, The Big Year.
The big year.
Now streaming on something.
No idea, somewhere.
Question on the life list, though, it's also sort of like by the honor code, right? Because it's not like you have to snap a photograph. So folks are competitive with one another, but they're also trusting in each other's, self-verifying in a way.
Yeah, and somehow that kind of works.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways that it feels like it shouldn't, but it does. Everybody who's sort of in this game wants to do it as accurately as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And so the side effect of that is that there's not a lot of cheating, it seems
Okay, got it. Question?
In as much as serendipity helps people find a rare bird, a bird out of, from out of the region, is there a great weather event that might help you see as many birds as possible in the Delta during the fall?
Oh, and repeat the question if you would.
Yeah, so the question is sort of, are there weather events that make finding sort of birds and rare birds, I think is or any birds?
Or a higher count?
Higher counts, just like bird events, weather patterns that help bird events. Complicated question, honestly, because there are definitely some things. I mean, storms are a big one. If you have a storm, especially if you have a storm coming in from a sort of unusual direction, most of the time in fall, a lot of the sort of offshore winds are kind of angled towards the south. And a lot of birds have evolved to work with that because they want the tailwind to push them south. If you have suddenly a weird north-blowing storm in the middle of fall, that's probably going to disrupt everybody's migration and probably going to cause some weird things to happen. And that can be very exciting if you're a birder, because birds end up in places they aren't supposed to be, or lots of birds end up making a weird decision like stopping in an unusual place, and so you have this surprise waiting for you when you go out. So definitely being a bit of a storm chaser, especially on migration, and paying attention to the weather is a big help, absolutely.
So one pro tip I heard about the Sacramento Valley, I learned through the hard way, which is I shared with everybody that I saw this incredible evening fly-off at Gray Lodge. It was amazing. I went back and told my wife and daughter about it. So then like 2 weeks later, I dragged them up, an hour to the same place, and there were like 3 birds. So that undermined my credibility. But one of the things that somebody said was when, after a big storm in the Sacramento Valley or the Central Valley, birds can kind of fan out because there's a lot of water everywhere, and they tend to congregate more at the refuges when there are drier periods. So try to hit up a refuge when there's sort of a drier period of the winter. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be exacerbated when you're in a drought year, because that surrounding water just gets more and more and more limited.
Yeah.
So it makes those pools of water that do exist that much more crowded and impactful and better viewing.
Yeah, fair enough. Good question.
So I'll share my spark bird.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
When I was about 5 or 6, my dad rescued an Anna's hummingbird from the
Nice.
and we got to dry it all out with a blow dryer, and my mom made some nectar and gave it some liquid courage and let it fly off, and that was it. I was hooked. So,
Awesome.
Amazing.
Pretty amazing to hold one of those little guys on your finger and have it take off because they weigh nothing. So my question is kind of a two-parter. I used to work at Point Reyes National Seashore after college, early days, and tons of ecotourism, people coming through because it's on the Pacific Flyway. And I got asked a million times, where can I find the yellow-billed magpie? So I was curious what you have been asked where to find the most often, and also what is the rarest or oddest bird that you have come across here in California?
And I want to premise this, I want to repeat Gina's question, but also share that Gina is a colleague here in the Office of the Secretary, and you are helping to lead and create a really interested reporting and monitoring system that they gave the acronym RAPTOR. And actually Gina helped develop like the emblem, which is really cool. But Gina, just for the folks who are joining via the live stream, you shared that your spark bird is Aunt Nana's hummingbird, and that your question is, one, can you and where you find a yellow red-tailed mag?
No, so
That was the question I got asked when I.
Okay, got it.
what bird do I get asked about a lot?
And then what is the oddest one that
And what's the oddest bird? So I'll do it in reverse order. My oddest bird is a bird that I found, well, I didn't find, but I went to see in Bolinas out in Marin County, around the coast. And some birders were going around Bolinas Lagoon birding, and they found this sandpiper that looked kind of weird. It was sort of a plover, and they're like, that doesn't look like our regular ones. And they got into it, and they got some photos, and they brought in some experts, and it ended up being greater sand plover, which at that time should have been over in Mongolia. It was this Asiatic stray that ended up on the wrong side of the Pacific Ocean, and then found itself in Bolinas.
Wow.
And so I heard about it from some friends, and there were tons of people who heard about this bird, and so everybody went out to find this bird. And so I was lucky enough, I did see the bird, and so that's definitely the oddest bird, this Asiatic stray, the greater sand plover.
That's a big left, wrong left
That is a
turn.
really long, really wrong turn. The question with those kinds of birds is always like, okay, what happens? Because maybe they spend the winter in this weird place, but then go back north and end up back in Siberia, and maybe the next year it didn't make a wrong turn, and it's now going down to Mongolia and like hanging out and doing its thing. Or has that now shifted it a little bit, and would that bird come back? That bird didn't, but there have been some odd birds that have seemed to show up over and over again in odd places. And so people do wonder, is that the same individual bird that maybe made a mistake, but then liked it?
Yeah.
And as far as the bird I get asked about most, I'm not really sure that I have one specific species that really stands out. I get asked a lot about where to go birding and stuff like that, but not about specific individual species, I don't think.
And before our next question, I want to ask you about community science. This idea that just regular people can go out there and collect information that benefits science. And I've heard of certain holiday bird counts that the Audubon Society does. What's your take on community science, people like me or folks here actually going out and contributing to science?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, when I was just starting birding, 6 years old, I started volunteering for a citizen science, a community science research project in Marin County that was monitoring hawk migration through Marin County. And it was an incredible experience to be able to do that as a young person, and it definitely helped to galvanize the interest that I already have and really drive me towards doing birds full time. And there are tons of different opportunities for people with almost any kind of time commitment that you feel like you have. There are big data sets like eBird, which is this online global platform run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and anybody who sees a bird can go on, you can add your sighting to eBird, and you become one little data point in this massive data set. And it can now be used by researchers to mine and find all sorts of interesting patterns about tracing climate change impacts and various disturbances and changes in migratory patterns, all sorts of stuff, because all of us are out there adding those observations over and over again. And yeah, there are more sort of formalized counts like the Christmas bird count that you mentioned, where groups get together for particular days on particular areas, and they usually have sort of a circle that they're supposed to count all the birds in that circle. And so you spend your day in that circle, counting all the birds you can. And those, again, become these incredibly powerful data sets, in large part because they've been done for so long. Christmas bird counts are well over 100 years now, and so that's an incredible data set to look back on and see how things have been changing or not changing and why and where.
Yeah, so fascinating. Yeah, Jacqueline.
So I've got one from a virtual attendee.
Cool.
We've got about 6 minutes left before we do the raffle. But hi, Erin. You're here talking to a group of folks in Natural Resources Agency. What is something you would like us to see us focus on to support bird species in California and to the future for our kids to enjoy? This question came from Angela House.
Awesome questions. I think, so I work for the Wildlife Conservation Board now, and I manage the stream flow enhancement program. So I'm focused on stream and river restoration statewide.
Thank you for that. That's great.
And I think that kind of, one of the reasons why I wanted that job, one of the reasons why I've enjoyed this kind of work is because I think habitat restoration is just so important. And that's sort of where I feel energized and compelled to put my energies, like personally. And so I think as a state, the more we can do that, the better. As we all sort of go about our daily lives, protecting habitat, creating those natural spaces as much as we possibly can is really where the salvation of a lot of these species is going to lie, I think. And the future, making sure that young people know what's out there, feel connected to it, and get to experience it is, I think, super, super important. I definitely spend a fair bit of time taking kids out birding and interacting with sort of younger birders. And I love doing it, and I think that, my hope is that that will sort of help secure birding and also birds and the ecosystems into the future.
Madeline,
Thank you for being here today.
do you have a spark bird?
Sparkbird is the yellow-billed magpie.
Awesome.
The reason being that every afternoon we have about 20 or 30 that come and hang out in our backyard, and so it's almost like it feels like we're sharing our home with them, and it's really a special experience that we get to experience almost every day. So my question is, how can we on a micro scale be coexisting with these birds, especially since many of us live in the Delta, even in ways of our houses? How can we sort of make a better habitat for them?
Yeah,
And
awesome
really
question
briefly, so
about-
this question comes from Madeline Drake, who helps to lead our 30 by 30 program. Your spark bird is a yellow-billed magpie, 20 of which come hang out in your backyard. And then your question is, what can we do to kind of coexist with birds on a daily basis?
Yeah, and so the best thing that we can all do is plant native plants. If you have a lawn and you can shrink your lawn, if you have some non-native species like ivy or something like that, they're often very commonly planted. And if you can remove those and replace those with natives that fit your particular biogeographic area. So if you're in the Delta, find some Delta native plants and fill your yard with those. The insects will benefit tremendously, and of course insects support a lot of the bird community, so the birds will also tremendously benefit. So yeah, converting as much as we can of the little spaces we live in to native landscape as much as we possibly can makes a big, big difference, both for your little spot, but also it's been shown to be sort of a pilot for your neighbors to see how it's done and kind of encourage that behavior to sort of snowball and spread farther and wider.
And we've seen that actually happen when people take out their lawns and put in native plants. There's kind of a proven spread by neighbors. And it seems so obvious that birds evolved along with these plants, and all of a sudden we take away the specific plants, they're not going to have a very good life, right, or livelihood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's been amazing talking to you, Aaron. We've got some door prizes, which
Yes,
is a fun
indeed.
way we celebrate in-person attendance here. But first, just join me in thanking Aaron for what he's doing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I'm gonna let you choose or help run the door prize here. And then I'll mention that after this, we're very thankful that Aaron's got copies here for sale. And I imagine that you'll sign people's books if.
Absolutely. This one's already signed, so it comes pre-signed.
Oh yeah, and this one is one of the door prizes. So let's start the door prizes with this really nice shirt from the Waterbird Habitat Project. This is an incredible project in Sacramento where community residents go out and remove fishing gear from the American River. It turns out that fishing gear is a huge challenge to birds and mammals along the American River. And an incredible friend and colleague named Andrea founded this and has ultimately resulted in taking out like hundreds, if not thousands of pounds of fishing gear, and has literally had interventions where they've saved the lives of birds that are either choking or in one case, a beaver that had a hook through its tongue. So it's kind of remarkable. But that's a little bit of an advertisement for a great grassroots organization.
Awesome.
You might be able to wear this on your back if you are lucky. Okay.
Okay, so we have proof here.
All right.
I'm Emily from Campus Connect team. So for those who signed in, I did get your names, and we're using a platform called Wheel of Names. So
Show this. So like your name is on a wheel.
Your name is on a wheel, surprisingly. Every first name is unique. So
Cool.
I'll go ahead and click on the wheel, and then I have my witnesses here waiting.
And then it spins.
No tampering.
Friends here.
All right, Rebecca Griffin.
Nicely done.
Thank you. All right, now this hat, a few of us had a chance to visit the Native American Land Conservancy at one of their pieces of land that's been recently acquired. They're really an important facilitator of ancestral land return to California tribal communities. and we were in the Coachella Valley, and they gave us this hat.
Spin the wheel.
And the winner is Kelly Long. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, Kelly. I spoke too soon. The wheel was slowing down. It's Carolyn Bush. Carolyn Bush. All right, operator. I wish you could split the hat, but and now maybe the coolest door prize. All right, I'm going to let you call the name, Aaron, because I clearly screwed up.
Let's see what we get.
Oh, wait. Oh,
Oh, this is perfect. This is poetic justice.
Kelly Long.
Amazing. Thank you.
There's one more question that's in the chat.
Oh, let's do it. One last question coming from our online joiners.
Stephanie Ponce, she wants to know, what was your first book idea that didn't get picked up?
Oh. So the question is the first book idea that has not yet been picked up.
Has not yet been picked up. I wrote up for my own blog for a very long time, and I thought an idea would be to sort of go back through all my old blog posts and sort of pull out some themes of sort of community science and ecosystem restoration and kind of small things that we can all do, and kind of try to find those essays that I had already written and probably add some more and kind of pull that together as a book.
Oh, cool.
But apparently, if you've already published your work online, publishers, not too interested. So
Good to know. Good to know. Well, Aaron, thank you for what you do. You and your colleagues at the Wildlife Conservation Board. Big thanks to everybody in the room.
Yes.
For the work that you do. And excited to read the book and actually get out there and see some of these birds in the Delta.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank
So
you so
thanks
much for
once
having me.
again. That was awesome.